Once upon a time, in a land far, far away, there was a little girl, and she lived alone in the woods, and she didn't have a mommy and daddy. She didn't know where she came from, and she didn't know where she was. All she knew was that she existed, and that she was happy. She loved the forest and the animals in that forest. She loved to play and chase bugs and butterflies. The forest had all the food she could ever want or need. It had apples and oranges, pears and berries. It had honey and veggies. In the forest, there was a river with salmon jumping upstream. There was a lake with swans and frogs, turtles and deer that would come and drink. The little girl loved her forest, but she was all alone. She had nobody to keep her company. Sometimes she thought she was a ghost because she felt so alone. One day she got really sad, so she started to cry. She cried and cried because she had nobody to talk to. She was so tired of being alone and having nobody to talk to. She couldn't understand why she was all alone and didn't want to be alone any longer. She went to the pond every day and would sit there and cry until one day she realized that every time she went and cried, the animals would come and she would feel better. She noticed that all the animals came when she cried. The more she cried, the more they came. So she cried more and more. The more the little girl cried, the more animals came. The girl felt much better seeing all the animals, all the deer and the rabbits, all the raccoons and squirrels. They all came and licked her face and licked up her tears so that she wasn't sad anymore. One day she went to the pond and she tried to cry, but no tears came out. She tried to get sad, but she just wasn't. She screamed and tried to make herself cry, but no animals came. When this happened, the little girl felt bored and depressed. She stared at the pond, but there wasn't a fish to be seen. She felt lazy and tired and didn't know what to do with herself. So the day went on until she decided to go for a swim. So she jumped in the pond and started to swim. She swam and started to feel her energy again. She started to feel like herself again the more she swam. No, it's a story I wrote, Lindsay. A long time ago. It's incomplete. But then the girl felt her this eerie feeling like something was watching her. So she glanced back and saw something big behind her. It was an alligator, and it was headed right toward her. She didn't scream, she swam faster and faster. The alligator saw the little girl and was hungry for lunch. The little girl was sad, but she didn't want to get eaten alive by a giant alligator. She swam as fast as she could and started to choke on the water because she could barely breathe. She thought she was about to get eaten, but then she saw the shoreline just ahead. The alligator was just a few feet behind her when she felt the sand under her feet, so she started to run. She outran the alligator because it had tiny little legs and couldn't catch her. The little girl was out of breath, soaking wet and in complete shock that she almost died. She finally found a dead tree that had fallen to sit on and rest upon. But she soon realized that it was getting dark, and she didn't know the part of the forest. She started feeling a bit nervous as she glanced around and heard scary noises. She saw creepy, rotting vines hanging from the tall trees, and there was a gray mist everywhere. The sky was turning purple, and she had heard more and more noises coming from the forest. She said out loud, "I better get going." But the voice she heard didn't sound like her own. She thought to herself, "Where am I? And why doesn't my voice sound like my own?" The girl quickly realized she was being haunted. So she got up to run, but she tripped over a rock. She fell and hurt her left knee. She screamed, "Ow!" and looked down at her knee, and there was bugs crawling all over her ankles. So she started brushing them off when she heard "woot hoo," and a giant owl with big orange eyes swooped down and clawed her head. The girl screamed and hit the owl as she struggled to run away. The girl started to run, and as she ran, she saw eyes in the dark woods glaring at her. The little voice in her head didn't sound so little anymore. It said, "Run, little girl." So she ran and heard laughter and frightening voices coming from inside and outside her head. Bats were swooping at her, screeching in high-pitched screams, and rats were squeaking and running around her ankles. The little girl was so scared, and she thought she would never escape this dark and haunted forest, when suddenly she saw a dark figure standing directly in front of her. It was a big woman in a black hat and in a black cloak. She had yellow skin and an ugly face. The woman reached her hands toward the girl and said, "Come here, little girl." The little girl said, "Who are you?" And the woman said, "I'm a witch." The little girl screamed out, "What's happening to me? I'm just a little girl." And the witch answered, "You're not a little girl anymore. That's just it. You're growing up." The little girl said, "If this is growing up, I don't like it." The witch replied, "Nobody does, but everyone has to do it anyway." The girl was silent and just stared at the witch. The witch looked back and laughed a quick chuckle. The girl noticed that the forest had quieted down and that she wasn't so scared anymore. All she could hear was the soft pitter-patter of raindrops hitting the leaves. The witch said, "Follow me, and I'll help you find the truth." Lindsay Bearju says, "Oh, gotcha. I was unsure. Haha. I joined while you were in the middle of it." Okay, no problem. Welcome. I'm excited. I've been wanting to read it for a while. The witch said, "Follow me, and I'll help you find the truth." The little girl squinted. She didn't know if she could trust the witch. But what else was she to do? After all, she was all alone in the forest. She was tired, lonely, scared, and she didn't want to stay alone forever. The girl smiled. The witch smiled back at her and turned and started to walk. The girl followed, and a path appeared in front of them. The two walked the path as the witch started to talk. The witch's voice sounded soothing, confident, reassuring to the girl, so the girl listened and didn't really say much. It sounded like the witch knew what she was talking about, and the girl wanted to feel that way herself. As the two walked, the sun started to come up, birds started to chirp, and the girl saw butterflies fluttering around. Things started to seem so much better. The voices in the little girl's head started to quiet, and she didn't even notice them as much. The girl felt